All right, going into week 12 of the 2024 NFL season, we have 14 current playoff teams and a few more just outside that top 14. But as of right now, and we'll throw up a fancy little graphic for you to show you what the current playoff picture is. In the AFC, Chiefs are the 1 seed for now. Bills are the 2 seed for now. Steelers are the 3 seed, sneaky contender for the bye. Texans are the 4 seed somehow. Chargers are the 5 seed. Ravens are the 6 seed. Broncos are the 7 seed, is 6-5, but a very strong 6-5. Over in the NFC, we have the Lions at the 1st seed, Eagles at the 2 seed, Cardinals at the 3 seed at 6-4, despite having the 2nd hardest strength of schedule in the entire league up to this point. So Cardinals earning it the hard way. Falcons are unfortunately the 4 seed. Vikings are the 5th seed. Packers are the 6th seed. And Commanders, been a little bit shaky as of late, but they're still hanging on to that last wild card spot at the 7th seed. So, knowing all that, the point of today's show is we're trying to separate the actual contenders from, I don't want to say pretenders, but let's just say they're also there, right? And we kind of have 3 tiers here. We have ceilings of divisional round, ceilings of conference championship, ceilings of Super Bowl, because not all playoff teams are created equal. And so we're basically trying to illustrate here how far each of the current playoff teams could go, at least according to, of course, our semi-educated opinion. But before we get into all that, EJ, my friend, wonderful co-host, how are you doing?
I'm good, outside of hating the current playoff rules, but we'll talk about that when we get to the end of the NFC. Other than that, I think this is a worthwhile show because we spent the first half of the season, if we're smart, learning about all these teams, learning about their competitive advantage within their conferences, which is going to determine all of this seeding and really how far they go. NFL's a little bit special in that it's one and done. Like we don't have playoff series here. You have a bad day, you're out. So there's always that thrown into the mix. But with everything we've learned in the first half of the season, what do we really feel like going down the stretch is the most real picture we could see for the NFL playoffs and eventually the NFL championship.
So, very special show today, obviously. Very special whiskey that I'm drinking while we do it, by the way. For those of you that drink along at home while you watch and or listen to this, I have the Jameson single pot still Irish whiskey that I picked up while I was in Ireland last spring. One of my favorite Jamesons. Unfortunately, I can't get it in the United States, so I'm working through it slowly, savor it as I go. EJ, are you drinking anything for this?
I am drinking base level Jameson, and it happens to be just a nip of it in coffee, but I am lucky enough to have been to your house and sampled that particular bottle that you're holding in your hand, and lovely stuff.
Yeah, when I got back from Ireland, I had like 11 different kinds of Jameson that EJ just worked his way through over the course of draft weekend. But this is definitely one of my favorites, so if you ever happen to be in Dublin or anywhere in Ireland, make sure to pick it up at the distillery. It's amazing. Now, with that said, let's get to the AFC. We're going to start with the division round ceilings. These are the teams that will be in the playoffs, or at least currently are in the playoffs, but we don't think they have a realistic chance to get past the division round. Maybe they sneak a wild card win somehow, but I don't see them winning 2 playoff games. For me, I have 3 such teams in the AFC. I have the Texans, unfortunately. They're at 7-4 right now with the 13th ranked strength of schedule. I have the Broncos at 6-5, who really have come on lately on the strength of Bo Nix improving. And I have the Chargers at 7-3. I think all 3 of them make it, but I don't think all 3 of them make it very far. So before I kind of get into my old diatribe of why I think that, what is your division round ceilings for the AFC, and do any of them cross over with me?
And just for the folks at home, we have not revealed these lists to each other. So this is us learning about the other's list as we do it. And I do have 2 overlaps. I only have 2, so they both overlap. Chargers and Texans.
Oh, so you have the Broncos maybe going further.
I do.
Okay. Well, we'll get to them when we do the conference championship level then. Let's start with the Texans. And I say this lovingly as a Texans fan. I do not foresee them going against any of these AFC defenses, whether it's Pittsburgh, whether it's Buffalo, whether it's the Chargers, especially the Broncos. I don't see them going through two of those defenses back to back with as poor pass protection as they have and making it out the other side. I think CJ Stroud is still very, very good. Unfortunately, they've taken some injuries at the receiver position, but they got Nico Collins back. Running the ball with Joe Mixon has been a lot better this year than it has been in the last couple years, but they still can't pass protect. Left guard is still a massive, massive issue. And as strong as their defense is and as strong as some of their offensive pieces are, if you don't have an offensive line, I don't really take you as seriously in January, especially if you're going to have to go on the road, right? Which they might have to go on the road to like Buffalo or something like that. So again, it's a strong team. Like the Texans are very solid this year, but boy, they just have to fix the interior offensive line, in particular left guard. I think their need at left guard is just as bad as the Bears need at left guard, to put it in context. Like they need one. And I can't see them being a true championship contender while CJ Stroud is continuing to run for his life. They have like a 45% pressure rate allowed over the last 3 weeks. It's just ridiculous. So again, it hurts, but they're not there yet. They're maybe like one more year away, but they're not there yet.
Color me envious of your 7-4 team that only needs one offensive lineman. Oh, cry me
It's
a
kind of
river.
important, though. It's just a little bit of. I mean, you saw when we did the Jets game for the TNF stream, Quinton Williams, like within 5 plays, was like,
"Yep,
I'm here, CJ." Like it was brutal.
Safest money we had on that particular game, but the Texans are just off this year, and whether or not it's left guard or a little bit of regression in the offense, I too am with you. CJ Stroud, still an elite quarterback, and the Texans, I think, are the poster kids for the absolute argument that could they win their game and move on a given day? They absolutely have the talent to. CJ could go on a heater and just, be generational. And would that get them to the next round? It would. Would they go farther than that? Most likely not, because when you're talking about this level, now we are talking about basically the top half of the league through the NFC and the AFC, you do have to be more complete because each step it ratchets up. We know how playoff football works. The weather gets cold, mistakes matter more, and your deficiencies are laid bare for everybody to see. Everybody knows them coming in on film, and they're going to try and exploit them. And if you can't find a way around, and the Texans have not this year been able to find a way around like they did last year, that's probably the big difference between Slowick last year and this year is last year he didn't have a great offensive line either. In fact, arguably worse, but he did more with it. And it's been more of a struggle this year. So again, I have them as divisional round ceiling. Could they go farther? Sure. The most likely destination is probably one and done for them.
I would look at the Chargers kind of similarly. Similarly, but different, but also similar in the sense where they have a very strong defense. They have a quarterback that we love. They have a head coach that we love. They have coordinators that we love. But there's just that missing piece on offense in particular. For the Texans, it's interior offensive line. For the Chargers, it's receiver. And also, to a degree, interior offensive line, but less so. But boy, they need a receiver. Like I need oxygen. Ladd McConkey is great. Out of all rookie pass catchers, he's third in yards right now. So again, that combination at the top of the draft, Joe Alt and Ladd McConkey, if we're stacking those two together, ended up being a better choice than, say, Malik Neighbors and whatever tackle they would have gotten right at the top of the second round. So they made the right call, but they're still not a complete receiving core. And if you're going into the playoffs with Ladd McConkey essentially being your most reliable receiving target, like it's just not enough. Like I love the guy. I really do. He's great. I can't tolerate them throwing 5 more go balls to Quentin Johnston. Like they just don't work. They don't work. Like every now and then somebody blows a coverage, he gets an easy catch, he gets a touchdown. Great. Like he's got like 5 touchdowns this year. But when you really need a big catch, like absolutely need it against tight coverage, and you're relying on him to be the one that comes down with it, it ain't working. It just ain't working. Like when they got that last drive to go score, it was Ladd. It wasn't QJ, and he might have that in him for a couple drives, but is that somebody like over and over and over again in January against the Steelers defense, against the Broncos defense? Like is Ladd McConkey going to go like 9 for 20 in the playoffs. Like, I like to think he could every now and then. I don't think you can build a passing game out of that. Like, they need a true number one. They do not have a true number one. They thought they were getting with QJ. That's been a failure. That's going to hold them back when they're playing against the true killers at the top of the conference. It's unfortunate because I love this team. I love a lot of what they've done. They're still a year away. The culture is amazing. The coaching staff is amazing. Most of the talent is great. But they're just not there. So again, division round ceiling. I think they can win a wild card game. But if they're going to like KC in round 2, boy, that's a tall order. I just don't think they're ready yet.
The fact that we're talking about the Chargers having a razor-thin margin to advancing to a second playoff game is testament to how far they've come in 1 year. This roster was nowhere near there. The culture was absolutely nowhere near there, and the results on the field were nowhere near there for the past several years. So the fact that all that changed in 1 year is really good news, Charger fans. I agree with you. I'm not relying on QJ. We're talking about the thinnest of margins here. And when you get into playoff football, is another team going to be able to shut him down? I have high confidence that they will. And even if Ladd goes 9 for 120, he's going to be it. There isn't anybody else to go 4 for 60 along with him that you really need. The running game is great. The defense is amazing under Jesse Minter. In fact, even better than I thought it was going to be, and I thought it was going to be really good. So if we're talking about a year away, you say the Texans are a year away. It feels like the Chargers are a year away and going solidly that direction. Like, I don't have any doubts that next year is going to be better no matter who they draft because they're really close now. And if they get a couple of options, look, it can be through free agency. It can be through the draft. Nolan Harbaugh could even be a UDFA. Like, if they get a spark at receiver to help support what they have in Ladd, who is amazing, and really to support Justin, who has played some of the best football of his career over the last month, you're going to see us talk about this team very differently. Now, that might seem like a minor distinction, but that's what separates teams in this round, is little bits. And that passing offense, when it really needs to make a play in December and January, I don't have faith in it right now. Talk to me again next year because I bet I will.
I mean, if they get T. Higgins in the offseason,
good night.
That's the last stone for Thanos at that point. Like, they go from division round ceiling to Super Bowl ceiling real fucking quick, just from that one move. Because that's kind of the whole. Like, that's really just it. And when you talk about teams in this level that are like solid playoff teams, they're going to end up at like 11-6. Usually, it's the one hole that holds you back in the postseason. Now, conference championship ceiling. I had one team. You had two. You already said Broncos were. Or do you have two?
Oh, I have 3.
You have 3. Okay. I have 1. You have 3.
Yes.
You said the Broncos were one of your 3. My
Correct.
one conference championship ceiling AFC team is the Steelers. I think they could get there. I don't see them beating out the top 3 in the conference to get all the way to the Super Bowl. But the more I watch this Steelers team, I understand they have the 25th ranked strength of schedule. Like, they've chewed up some pretty bad teams, but I see the difference in this offense since Russ took over. The defense is still absolutely incredible. Highsmith's injury obviously is a factor, but it's not a season-ending thing. Like, he's going to be back. You have an edge rush rotation, with Watt, Highsmith, and Herbig, who's a great young player. You still have a monstrous interior presence with Hayward. Their linebacker play is better this year. Their DB play is still as good as ever. Like, kind of all they were missing was just competent quarterback play. Like, even Najee looks better this year. I mean, he lost 10 pounds, so that helps. But, like, all they were missing was just not having Kenny Pickett. And now they don't have Kenny Pickett out there. And I mean that in a good way. So I really do think this Steelers team is just a bitch to play against. And they're an even bigger bitch to beat. Just ask Baltimore. They can't do it. And I think if they get the right matchups in the postseason, they could very easily end up in the AFC Championship game against like either KC or Buffalo. Dare I say Baltimore again? If Baltimore manages to get through there, and if they're hosting Baltimore in the AFC Championship game, just knowing what we know about Baltimore playing against Pittsburgh, like all of a sudden all bets are off at that point. But like I really do think they could get there at least, and I would even say it's like a 40% chance. Like just looking at them versus the other AFC teams, it's like a 40% shot they get all the way to that championship.
They are built to be a really tough nut to crack in playoff football. They have a very strong defense. They can run the ball. And now they have just enough in terms of the shot play. The reason I have them here instead of a level higher is because can somebody get enough pressure on Russ and shut it down? Because it is the slimmest of margins in the pass game. This is not a volume thing. They're getting 2 or 3 big ones a game that are powering that offense. And you need those explosive plays to shorten a couple of drives. And they're getting it. But they're getting it on like 14 completions, 17 completions. A couple of those are going to hit the ground in the playoffs. It's just the way it goes, whether it's the weather, whether it's a really tough defense they're playing, great defensive backs, whatever. That margin's going to shrink, and it's going to look more like the team they were a month ago, which would have been a, divisional round team, not a conference championship game team. And, how long can they hold it when the stakes get a lot higher? I don't think they can take it all the way. I don't think they are a Super Bowl team, which is why they're in this tier. Are they better than they were a month ago? They are, and they're also going to be very difficult to beat. I'm with you that if the matchups line up their way, it could roll for them, and they could end up there. It's possible. I can see the path. It's thin, but it's possible. So it's kind of like the Chargers, but like one tick up on that passing game, but it's a really slim tick. So, they make it one more level up for me than the Chargers do. The other team is Denver, which was, a team that you haven't mentioned yet. But Denver's in my conference championship game tier because the defense, same thing, is lights out and playing better. Bo Nix's ascension over the last 2 to 3 weeks has really changed the outlook for this team. They can now put up points on good defenses. They couldn't do that before, and that would have been the death knell for them. They might have snuck into the playoffs, but they weren't really going anywhere. Now they can get in the playoffs and win a game because they are built to do it. And if Bo continues to accelerate his growth curve, they're going to be very dangerous. They're going to be the team you don't want to play in the playoffs. So they're a conference championship game team for me as well.
The thing with Bo, and I mean, God, we in the first month of the season, we sat on that couch back there and we talked about how rough his transition to the NFL had been, which surprised us because he was one of the more quote unquote pro-ready quarterbacks in the class, right? Like he was accurate. He was smart, had seen everything. He started for like 6 years, like as more experience literally than any other quarterback ever in the history of college football. We're like, hey, if somebody's going to hit the ground running, it's going to be Bo. And then he didn't, right? And we were kind of surprised by that. And then we kind of looked at the structure around him. And we're like, I don't know, like Peyton's offense, it's very wordy. It's hard for a rookie to pick up because there's just so much verbiage stacked on top of it, and Carmichael is not exactly a guy that's known for running great offenses when he's not working with Sean Payton, right? And so we're like, I guess if you're looking at who's running the show there, like maybe it wasn't as good of a structure as we thought. And then all of a sudden it turned around. And I think the Broncos coaching staff made some adjustments when they realized like, hey, Bo is struggling here. Like, let's try to streamline this thing. Let's simplify how many different personnel groupings and formations we're using so that, we're going into the game with a slimmer game plan. And that's really, really helped. And now, you're seeing a Broncos offense where they call on him to make like a couple big time throws a game and he's hitting them. But generally speaking, they're scheming up a lot of layups for him. And in this last game against Atlanta, and again, it's the Atlanta defense, I get it, but he had a 90% adjusted completion percentage. He had 318 yards, 9.3 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns, no picks, 144.9 rating. That's incredible. His average depth of target was 3.8. Like, it was easy shit, right? He threw down the field like 4 times. So they're trying to, I mean, honestly, they're doing what they should have done immediately, which was tailor the offense to a rookie quarterback. Even though he was experienced, he's a rookie, and they're trying to make it as easy as possible for him. And all of a sudden, this Broncos offense has come alive, and they've looked a lot better. You package that with an elite, and I mean truly elite defense, and you have a 6-5 team that doesn't look like a 6-5 team. Like they took down the Bucs early in the year, back when the Bucs were healthy and good. They got 7 sacks in that game. Baltimore poured it on them, but then they poured it on Atlanta. So they're still learning how to win. Still a young team, 3rd youngest team in the NFL. They're still learning how to win, but they're learning fast. And if they get to the playoffs, again, I had them as a ceiling for a divisional round, but like you could talk me into conference championship, because as long as Bo doesn't screw up and they ride that defense and ride that running game, like you could sell me on it. Do I think it's likely? No, but you could sell me on it.
Well, there's one throw from last week, and I want to add on. This is from Bo Nix, and while you're talking about schemed up stuff and short stuff, that's all true, but he looks like he's playing unencumbered now. He was weighed down. It was a sort of a dirty, messy look, and he could get through the play call, and he knew it was happening, but it was almost like by the time he got to actually throwing the ball, he kind of was already spent. And the throws didn't come out necessarily on time. They certainly didn't look as accurate. His mechanics were kind of gross, and it seemed like it was just too much. By reducing that earlier in the play and even game plan load to what's mashing with him, getting rid of some of the bad plays that don't work. So Bo's come up, and the Broncos' offensive brain trust has kind of come down. They've met in the middle, and now what he's doing is playing clean. And you're seeing, yes, all those layups and whatever, but there was one throw on Sunday that looked very much like his college career. It was an absolute rip over the middle of the field, and it was mid-distance. It was about 15 yards, and watch him throw that football. Like where he threw it, when he threw it, how he threw it. That throw right there, I was like, oh, hey, hang on. That's different. He knew that was going to come open. He had to absolutely fire it in there. He did it easily. Like it looked like his college tape. And I thought, all right, he's turned a little bit of a corner. I'm not saying that's all you're going to get from him from the rest of the season. Still going to be a rocky ride. But if he can do that, we really hadn't seen that through the first 5, 6, 7 weeks of the season. And last week, that throw was like, okay, that's a playoff throw right there. If he can hit that in that window and look like that doing it, I don't really want to be playing the Broncos.
And that's what makes them a wild card, right? And not a wild card in the sense of like wild card team, even though they will be a wild card team. Wild card in the sense of we kind of don't know what we're going to get. Like the variance for Denver is extraordinarily high. Because if it's a good Bo game, all of a sudden, you're taking KC to the wire in their house, and you're one special teams play away from beating them. But if it's like a rookie Bo game where he's just not seeing the field well, he's not accurate like he was early in the season because he was just straight up not accurate early on, and then you get boat raced, right? Both things are equally possible to me, and I really don't know what we're going to get. But so far, or rather over the last month and a half or so, we've kind of been trending more towards good Bo than bad Bo. So if I was a Broncos fan, I'd be pretty excited about that.
Yeah, arrow pointing up is the way that it feels.
100%. Now, you mentioned you have a third team in this tier. I have 3 in the Super Bowl tier. That means you have 2 in the Super Bowl tier.
Correct.
Who's the one that you have down here?
This was a struggle for me because I really like watching this team. But again, if you're not a balanced team and you get to the playoffs, those cracks are likely to show. So it's the Ravens, because the Ravens have a monstrous offense and could win on any given day because of that. Lamar could just go straight Superman and propel them. So I'm not saying they can't get to the conference championship game, but even if they did, I don't think they win it against the 2 teams I have above them, because those teams are much more balanced and their defense is a heck of a lot better. You don't have to be great at defense to win the Super Bowl, but you need to be average. When Kansas City won the Super Bowl, when they had great offenses, sometimes their defense was ranked 14th, 16th. That's fine. You don't have to be elite at defense, but you cannot be ass. And the Baltimore Ravens right now can't stop anybody. They can score on anybody. Any given time, through the air, Lamar's legs, Derrick Henry's legs, big shots to Zay Flowers, Todd Monken can matriculate it down the field using Mark Andrews if he wants to. All that is possible. That offense is so much fun to watch, and it's what we hoped for years and years in Baltimore, to match with that elite defense. And right as the offense ascends to truly elite status, one of the best offenses in the NFL, bar none. The defense fell off the freaking table, and they can't have that. And unless they find a way to bounce back to lower middle average, they're going to get bounced out of these playoffs. Somebody's going to push them. They're going to slow the offense down enough, and then the opposing offense is going to go against that defense and score when they need to. And even if it's down to the wire, even if it's a close game, when it comes down to crunch time in the playoffs, I do not have any faith in the Ravens to get a stop when they need it. And you need at least a couple of those on a playoff run. And right now, I don't know where it would come from. So unfortunately, and it pains my heart because I love watching this team play. And again, I love Monken's offense. I really love Lamar as a player. I think he's amazing. One of the best players in the NFL. I cannot see this team, because it's still a team sport, going all the way in the AFC.
My struggle with Baltimore is, and again, we could just kind of reveal it now because obviously people could do math. Your Super Bowl tier is KC Buffalo. My Super Bowl tier is KC Buffalo Baltimore. And I know a lot of Steelers fans are going to be like, how are you putting the Ravens above the Steelers? Right? Like, we just beat them. We beat them like 8 of the last 9 times. Like, what are you doing? If they run into Pittsburgh in the playoffs, it's over. You're probably correct. But the reason why I have the Ravens in the Super Bowl tier is solely as deference to the current MVP. And I mean current MVP in the sense that he was the MVP last year. He's probably going to be the MVP this year. Any given game, other than against Pittsburgh, he can take it over, right? They were literally a toe away from beating KC. They were a toe away from doing it. They obliterated Buffalo, like absolutely annihilated that team. It was 35-10, right? So like, I know a championship caliber team is in there, and it's totally matchup dependent. I understand that. They have a couple matchups that they just can't seem to get over, but most of the time, they're going to kill teams because they have Lamar and because they have Monken and just because that offense is so damn good. They remind me a lot of the 2019 Chiefs, which is probably not good for my case because the Chiefs got knocked out in the conference championship game because they didn't have a defense, right? Bob Sutton's defense was terrible. But they remind me a lot of that team where it's like, I get it, they're one-dimensional, but shit, that one dimension is so good. It's so good. And, you know, there's like a couple matchups that they don't work against. But if they get anybody else, like if they get Buffalo in the conference championship, I think Baltimore goes, right? If they get, even if they get KC in the conference championship, like in a rematch in KC, I truly think they could do it. I really, really do. I think they could do it because KC has only gotten less healthy since the season began, right? And a lot of cracks in the armor have shown. Not enough for me to think that KC shouldn't be a Super Bowl contender, but like not a perfect team, right? And I really do think Baltimore could do it. Like the one team where if they got matched up where I'm like, all right, yeah, good season, boys. See you next year. It's Pittsburgh. But other than that scenario, I've got them there.
Just to be fair, Steelers fans, if you're going to yell at him. Because I have the Ravens and the Steelers in the same tier for that reason. That's one of the other reasons that I couldn't put the Ravens in the top tier with the Bills and the Chiefs was because I was like, what if they do get matched up with Pittsburgh? So Pittsburgh and the Ravens are in the same tier for me. That's why I have 3 in the middle tier and only 2 in the top tier.
Well, before we move on to talking about the aforementioned several times, Kansas City Chiefs and Buffalo Bills, I do want to thank Underdog Fantasy for making this show possible in the first place. And if you're going to be along with us on Thursday night to watch said Steelers play on TNF this week and probably yell at me for not having them in the Super Bowl tier, you can do so while playing Pick'ems alongside us. This week's Pick'em for TNF is going to be Jameis Winston at half a passing yard. I don't know how many yards he's going to get in this game. Probably not very many against Pittsburgh, but I have to imagine it's going to be at least 1. So again, that is your free pick for Pick'ems. Steph Curry is the Wednesday free pick, and then we got LeBron on Friday. So, 3 GOATs back to back to back. As usual, you can use the QR code on the screen or the link in the description below. Use promo code BOOTLEG. That will get you up to $1,000 in deposit bonuses, as well as, again, that Jameis Winston free pick. There's promos all throughout every single week. There's profit boosts. There's something going on Underdog every single day between hockey, basketball, NFL. I mean, there's like 11, 12 different sports you could play along with on there. So again, if you want to play pick'ems along with us on TNF for that Steelers stream, or if you just want to yell at me, that's cool too. Either way, again, use the promo code bootleg at the link in the description below or at the QR code on the screen. Thank you once again to Underdog for sponsoring today's show. And with that, EJ, I'll tee you up. This is one of your 5 hometown teams. Your original hometown team is a Western New Yorker by blood. Buffalo Bills. Talk me through it.
Yeah, my dad's hometown team. He was born in Buffalo. I'm a little more split between Buffalo and the city geographically, but if I have to pick a New York team, it's absolutely the Bills. Bills are my top team just because they just beat the Chiefs, but this is splitting hairs between these two teams. Either one could be there, and I think will be there. I think the AFC representative for the Super Bowl will either be the Chiefs or the Bills, and it's going to come down to that game. And I think everybody knows that. I think everybody knew that before last weekend's game. It was at the beginning of the season when you saw the matchup, you said, well, that'll help determine playoff seeding, and that might determine that matchup. But these games are extremely close. These two teams see each other every year. They know each other very, very well, and they have 2 of the best quarterbacks on the planet guiding their team. So this is a couple aliens who happen to land and put on helmets, and they go at it, and we get to be the beneficiaries of that. In terms of picking it, feels very much like a coin flip. Yes, the Bills just beat them. If it ends up being in KC, is that an advantage? We saw it was last year for sure. Probably not as big an advantage over the Bills as it was over the Dolphins. Certainly not. Bills also playing cold weather outdoors. But make me pick this one? No, only at pain of death. There is no way. It's going to be a great game. The AFC representative is coming out of this game. That's all I feel really confident about.
These are the 2 best teams. Like you said, these are absolutely the 2 best teams in the AFC. Even though I have the Ravens in this tier too, it's just because like they have the MVP. But as far as teams go, it's KC and it's Buffalo. They're the only teams in the conference that I can really truly trust on both offense and defense, to varying degrees on offense. But like they're both really good defenses. They both have alien quarterbacks. There's a lot of similarities here, and that's why every time these teams play, it's going to be close. And I truly do think that Buffalo could do it this year. If they don't do it this year, God, when are they going to do it, right? I will say, when it comes to Kansas City, boy, I got to be careful how I word this. I'm not out. Clearly, I put them in the Super Bowl tier. But there's some problems, man. And I'm not just talking about like, oh, the offense isn't super productive and Mahomes is turning the ball over. Like, yes, obviously, that's a thing. I'm talking like non-Mahomes related personnel issues. There are some problems that I thought were going to get better that just haven't, right? Offensive tackle, still bad. Still can't pass protect, especially left tackle. They've got issues. Corner 2. Like, Trent is Trent. Trent's amazing. CB2 for this team is an issue. It is a massive issue. And if you're going against Buffalo in the playoffs with all of their receivers, right? If they have Amari, if they have Shakir, if they have Keon, if they have Kincaid, they've got Trent. Trent can't cover everybody. Like, CB2 is a huge issue. And a sneaky issue for this team that I kind of didn't realize until this week, because it always felt like, they were getting a ton of edge pressure. But their edge rushers, their non-Chris Jones edge rushers, are not that good. Karlaftis is solid. Like, Karlaftis is really solid. He's great. He's great, like, all-around football player. But his pass rush win rate is like 12%. It's about half of the elite guys. And you got Chris Jones, again, when you're watching Chiefs games, it feels like they get a bunch of edge pressure, but that's because they line up Chris Jones at edge on over half his snaps. He only has 42% of his snaps going into this year at defensive tackle. Most of his snaps are at edge because they don't have anybody else who can do it. And if you're looking at just like edge rushers for the Chiefs, the non-Chris Jones edge rushers, they're 29th as an edge rush position group in pass rush win rate. Like, that's an issue, right? And so if you're putting Chris Jones out on the edge, are you getting it on the interior? The answer is no. And so it feels like their non-Chris Jones pass rush is not that good. Karlaftis is solid, but beyond Karlaftis, they got nothing. Like, they got nothing when it comes to pass rush. And if you have a dangerously thin pass rush that is very reliant on one Hall of Fame caliber player and a really good corner but no CB2, and you're having issues with pass protection in your own right at offensive tackle, now I got concerns. I still have them in this tier because as a whole, it's still an elite football team. They win games for a reason. We literally just talked about the reasons why they win games a couple weeks ago, right? It doesn't mean they're not vulnerable. They're very vulnerable. And the Bills exploited those vulnerabilities because I think the Bills have less vulnerabilities than KC does. Now, do they have Patrick Mahomes? No, but they got somebody who's pretty fucking close. Do they have Andy Reid? No, but they got a pretty good head coach and a pretty good OC. Do they have Chris Jones? No, but in the aggregate, they got a bunch of really good defensive players on that defense. So it does kind of feel like if you're looking at KC versus Buffalo, it's the KC core versus the world. And that core is pretty darn good. They've won back-to-back Super Bowls because of that core. But if I had to put these two true Super Bowl contenders against each other right now, I kind of think Buffalo's better. Like I kind of do. And if Buffalo doesn't get the Ravens in the playoffs, like if the Steelers knock out Baltimore, right? I think Buffalo could beat Pittsburgh. I think Buffalo could beat Houston, obviously. They take care of the Chargers. They take care of the Broncos. I think they could take care of KC. Might depend on where that game is played, but the one threat to Buffalo to me, as far as matchups go, is Baltimore. If they're gone, because the Steelers do them a solid, the road's open. They can do it. But again, this sounds like such a negative thing where I'm talking about KC as Super Bowl contenders and I'm only talking about their holes. But we all know what their strengths are. I don't feel like people talk about their holes correctly, like what their holes actually are. It's not Mahomes throwing picks. It's the fact they can't fucking pass protect. Like, that's the hole.
Yeah, if you change coaches, and this is going to make a lot of Chiefs fans angry, if you put Andy Reid on the Bengals and Zach Taylor on the Chiefs, that defensive line is the same, right? Chris Jones is better than Trey, but Trey has been doing it himself all year with no help, pass protecting from the tackles. Who has that issue? Oh, yeah, Bengals, right? Is Mahomes better than Burrow? I'll leave that to the Bengals fans and the Chiefs fans to fight in the comments. Go for it. Have at it, right? I would say Mahomes is clearly better right now. But if you're talking about just the holes, like you said, and that's what we're doing with all these teams, we're talking about all the top half of the NFL. So what we're looking for is the deficiencies, the weaknesses, where they might get beat, not where they will get beat. That's not what we're saying. But say Chris Jones, rolls an ankle. It's the same result as if Trey Hendrickson is out for a couple of weeks. There is zero pass rush off the Bengals. There would be a very similar amount of pass rush that Spags would have to scheme around. And it's not that they haven't spent resources. They have. Their GM is really good. He's spent a lot of picks. Those guys, for the most part, have not created somebody to balance out that pass rush, which is why they, when push came to shove, they re-signed Chris Jones for all the money because they knew if he left, there was no certainty they were going to be able to really generate any pass rush, and they know they needed it and how important he is to that defense. That also makes them dependent on him in a way that is dangerous for playoff teams because anything can happen. Do I want to see the Chiefs with a healthy Chris Jones? Heck yeah, it's better football. If he gets knocked out, I'm not sure they have any kind of next man up that could create his pass rush in the aggregate. So that's what we're talking about here. It's not that that's why the Chiefs are going to lose. That's not what we're saying. We're saying if the Chiefs lose, people are going to look back and say, ooh, we could have been a little bit stronger here and here.
One quick note, and then we'll get right back to the show. You guys are very familiar with Manscaped at this point because they've supported us forever. But they did just release a brand new addition to their grooming line that you might be interested in called the Chairman Pro, which is an old school electric foil shaver that can give you a professional shave right at home. You can use either the skin-safe 4-blade foil for a smooth finish, or if you want a stubble look, they have multiple options for the stubble trimmer to give you either a 1 to 2 day look or a 3 to 4 day look, depending on your preference. It's also waterproof, so you can use it in the shower if you want, and it makes it easier to clean too because you can just rinse it under the sink. It also, of course, has an LED spotlight so you can see every hair you're trying to shave, and it has up to 75 minutes of runtime. So if you're in need of a new shaver to maintain your stubble or to have a fresh and smooth face every single day, check out the Chairman Pro at Manscaped. And of course, check out everything else they have to offer too, whether it's body trimmers, lotion, shave gels, nose hair trimmers. I mean, you name it, they have it when it comes to grooming. You can see it all at manscaped.com. And if you use promo code BOOTLEG, you'll also get a 20% off discount and free shipping on your order. Again, that is manscaped.com, promo code BOOTLEG. That will give you 20% off and free shipping on whatever you get. Thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring today's show. And with that, let's get back to it. Again, they're one rolled ankle away from having a pass rush that looks frighteningly similar to Atlanta, right? Which is probably as good a transition as we can get to going over to the NFC side, where we had to slot Atlanta somewhere because they're currently the 4th seed in the NFC. We had to put them somewhere, and so I put them as a division round ceiling. I think if there's anybody who's going to be a wild card round ceiling, it's probably Atlanta for me. Because, oh my God, that pass rush is bad. Like, it's the worst pass rush in the NFL. And I don't want to say it's not close, but it ain't. It's pretty far. Like, it's pretty far.
Statistically, it's not close. They are clearly the worst team in the league at generating sacks. And it also looks like that on paper. It's not. Sacks can be fickle. It's kind of like interceptions or fumbles. Some years they're up, some years they're down. Sometimes you look at the tape and go, oh, but they're so close. They're not really close. The pressure rates are down. They're not impacting the opposing passer. I'm just going to say, can we change the rules? We've been talking about this for a couple of years now. Like, do division winners have to go? And people might say, well, the Falcons have a good win-loss record right now, and it'll probably be about 9 wins at the end of the year. Yeah, that's not going to make them one of the best teams in the NFC, and it might not. They're on a 2-loss streak, and opponents have pretty much found the way you need to beat them. You know the offense is going to go off, but you know that your offense is also going to be able to score. And again, we talked about this all through this podcast. If you are not a balanced team, you're not going to go far in the playoffs. So if I didn't have to put the Falcons in, i.e. the current rules were, well, somebody's going to win the division, so somebody gets that spot. If I didn't have to right now, I wouldn't have, because I don't believe in them in the second half of the stretch. Offense is amazing. Kirk can get super hot at any time. They're utilizing all those weapons, and their offensive line's pretty good too. They're running the football as well. It's not just the Kirk show. That's great. The defense is a lot like we talk about the Ravens defense. It is not able to generate pressure when it needs to get a stop to take them farther into the playoffs. So again, caveat, if the rules were different, I would not have the Falcons in this group. As the rules stand, yes, they win the NFC South because they already beat the Bucs twice.
I would say offense was amazing. I mean, Denver just pants them, completely pants them, right? And it's not just because Denver's great, but when I look at this Falcons offense, and Denver is great, by the way, I want to emphasize that.
Yes.
Like, they are great defensively. But it's not just the Broncos defense is a top 3 to 4 defense in the NFL. It's when you're looking at the splits for Atlanta, they're mighty predictable, right? And this is the time of year when predictable offenses that were super hot for the first 8-9 weeks, or 7, if you're the Commanders. This is the time of year where people catch up and they start clamping down, right? And it's happened to Washington, who we'll talk about in just a second. I think it could potentially happen to Atlanta because their splits are pretty striking, right? This is a team that is 31st in shotgun. They're 27th in under center. They're first by a mile in pistol. 43% of the time they're in pistol. 44 actually. Next closest is 19%. Like, they are in pistol constantly. Why? They have to be. Kirk can't.
They don't have a choice.
They don't have a choice, right? So when they're running all this outside zone, it's tougher to do it from under center because, like, he has to get to that landmark to hand it off to Bijan or Tyler so that they can take the proper angle of approach on these wide zone runs. if he can't get there when he's lined up under center because you got to move, you got to get out there, all of a sudden you have to run it from pistol, right? So you're looking at the run splits from pistol, 76% outside zone. Like, you know what they're doing when they're in it. When they're in shotgun, it's 79% inside zone or duo. You know what they're doing. Under center, they're 87% run. Why? Because if you're doing a drop back pass from under center, you got to get deep. You got to get to like 8-9 yards quickly so that you can then step up for the timing of the play. Because you get deep and then you step up to about 7 to 8 yards. And based on however the progressions are, again, if you're under center, it's more of a progression read. If you're in the shotgun, it's more of a snapshot read. We've talked about that several times on the show. But if you're under center, it's a progression read. You got to get to your spot so you can hit that progression on time. If you have a bum foot because of an Achilles and you can't get there, you're just not going to throw from under center. So they're 87% run, which is why they don't do a whole lot of under center, period, because they know it's super easy to predict. But you look at those splits against Denver, they had 2.4 yards per carry because Denver knew exactly what they were going to do. And I worry that Atlanta is now getting to the part of the schedule where everybody realized, like, oh, they do the same shit every single week, and they just rely on out-executing you. What happens if we're just as talented on defense as you are on offense, and you have to win with scheme? They can't. Quarterback can't move. They cannot be anything but predictable right now. So I really worry about Atlanta. I think this skid is not going to slow down. Like, I think they'll probably end up at 9 wins, 8 or 9 wins, right? Just based on who they still have to play. But do you think that they're going to beat anybody in the playoffs? Like, against this pretty strong NFC? I don't. Like, if they got Philly in the first round, if they got Cardinals, I just don't see it.
No, I don't like their limitations. And if I had to be out, like if I had to short a stock in the playoffs, I would short the Falcons with a bullet and it wouldn't be close.
Similar kind of story for the Commanders, right? Like, they jumped out, super hot start first half of the year, but everybody kind of knew that their offense was fairly predictable. They were like over half of their pass attempts were either RPOs or screens. You looked at the game last week against the Eagles. I think it was 24 out of 32 pass attempts were within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage off the top of my head. Like, it's just not a very diverse pass game right now. And that's not entirely Jaden Daniels' fault, right? Like, we saw him be a very vertical thrower at LSU. But they also have pass protection issues themselves, like left tackle, major problem for them. And I think the lack of depth in the receiving core is starting to rear its ugly head. Like, you got Terry, and we like Noah Brown as like a 3 or a 4, but what else? So it's one of those where it's like, if the Commanders are not running the ball really well and hitting a deep shot to Terry, they don't really have a whole lot of other ways to beat you. And Jaden, I still think Jaden's rookie of the year for now. Keyword for now. Still a long time to go. But some of the questions that I had when he was coming out of LSU are starting to creep up a little bit. I don't think he's going to be a bust. Like, I'm not saying that whatsoever. Anybody who is saying that based on, a 10-game sample size is just not a serious person. But he's clearly not all the way there. And clearly the offense has yet to adjust. It's still very predictable, and it's still just not talented enough. So I kind of feel like we're starting to hit that wall for the Commanders, personally. And even though the defense has improved over time, I just don't think that's enough to offset how many steps back the offense has taken. So ultimately, they're going to make the playoffs. I think they're going to be a wild card. Are they going to get past that? Unlikely. It depends on who they face, but they're definitely not getting past division round. If they got to go against like Detroit in round 2, good night, but they could get there. Maybe, possibly.
Yeah, so we've got Falcons and Commanders in our division round. I just want to say, again, we're at that tipping point of the season where some things that look really good right now, emphasis on right now, are fool's gold. Falcons are 1. Commanders could be. I have a little more faith in the Commanders down the stretch. We'll see about that, but they too could fall off, and they could become the cast-offs that don't make playoffs. Falcons are going to win because they're going to win the division. But Commanders could get bounced, and teams like the Niners, who are sitting right around 500, just lost to the Seahawks, doesn't look good. But the Niners, to me, are the NFC version of the Chiefs in terms of their regular season record matters less. This year, injuries have been a thing, but again, if they're getting healthy, they could push for that final playoff spot. It's possible. It's not likely, but it's possible. Seahawks kind of on the middle tipping point. Yes, they just beat the Niners. Yes, they look like they're trending in the right direction, but they too, to me, feel more tenuous, like they could be up or down any given week. I don't have a lot of faith in them to go on a solid roll. Could they? Are they getting healthier? Is the defense playing better? Yeah, it's possible. More of an outside shot for me. And then the very, very outside shot would be the Rams because, man, if they've been injured, yes, they're getting healthy. They got a couple of offensive linemen back. That was big, but you see the receivers kind of go up and down every week. Who's in, who's out, who's hurt. The consistency really isn't there, and they're going to be chasing. Because of their record through the first half, it's an uphill climb, so they're kind of the dark horse way in the back of the race. Yes, they could make some crazy second half surge. I don't really think so. But this divisional round for the NFC was easily the muddiest in this whole exercise for me. There's a lot of teams that could still shift, and I don't have a ton of faith in any of them right now.
So you basically just have like 75% of the NFC West just waiting to take the Commanders' spot if they fall out.
Somewhere. Maybe. We'll see.
Well, right now, the current 3 seed in the NFC is the other NFC West team, the Cardinals, who are 6-4. They're leading the division, but not only are they leading the division, they're leading the division with the second hardest strength of schedule in the entire NFL so far. So that's a feat, right? To have that hard of a strength of schedule and be 6-4, right? And there were some winnable games early on that they lost that I know they want back. Like this could be very easily a 7-3. Dare I say 8-2 team if they just made like 4 extra plays in those games, right? Kyler's playing well. The defense surprisingly has really, really bounced back. Overall, throughout the year, they're 26th in terms of EPA per play against defensively. But if you're just going from week 5 to now, they're 17th, so they're just average. Since week 7, they're 11th, and since week 9, they're 3rd. They did play against the Bears and the Jets, full disclosure. But I think those swings at least tell me, like, okay, this is an average defense. Like the 26th is kind of a holdover from the first month of the year when they were trying to figure this thing out. They're at least average now. And you package that together with an offense that literally has the highest explosive run percentage in the league at 18.3%, even higher than Baltimore. In the past month and a half, they've had the best true drop back pass protection in the entire NFL, meaning non-RPO, non-screen, non-play action, like true, like we are passing the ball. We need to protect. They've been number 1 in the league. So there's a lot of reasons here for me to be super high on the Cardinals. And in our offseason preview series, we talked about this team being kind of like that sneaky snake in the grass in the NFC. Like, hey, like nobody's talking about Arizona, but like they've spent the last couple years kind of building a quietly solid team here. They're kind of more than solid now. So I have them in my conference championship tier because of that. I think they could legitimately make it that far. They gotta get lucky with who they draw in the first round and in the second round because there's a couple juggernauts at the top of the conference I just don't think they're ready for yet. But I mean, if you give them any of like the 5 teams that we just talked about in the division round section, basically any of their division opponents plus the Commanders and plus the Falcons, if you give them any combination of those 2 teams, they'll probably run through them and make it. And I think the only way they get knocked out is if they go against Detroit, Philly, and that's probably it, Detroit or Philly. Like I think it's probably the only 2 teams that would take them out.
Yeah, this is a team that's exhibiting a lot of the qualities you want in a playoff team now in the middle of the season. The coaching has been there, the talent and the players really have caught up with that now in the full, middle of the second year of this regime. Everybody's starting to gel and get it. Took longer than anybody wanted. The quarterback is playing extremely well. Kyler is playing some of his best football. Again, he's been high highs and low lows, just an absolute roller coaster. And we're seeing more consistency MHJ's coming along. Surprisingly, like you said, this defense is middle of the pack. But we said earlier, you don't have to be an elite defense, but you do have to be middle of the pack. So when they were down at 25th and 26th, we were kind of looking at that off-season prediction going, well, that's got to get better or we're going to look like idiots. It's gotten better. It's trending in the right direction. So you have the quarterback playing well. You have the defense playing better. You have the coaching still doing a great job. The rushing game was elite last year. It was the only thing that was really elite last year, but they've continued. Again, as teams have gotten tape, Drew Petzing's done a really nice job of adjusting and keeping that rush game not only relevant, but at the top of the game. So a lot of things are starting to come together for the Cardinals at the right time. And again, as we look at this group, I very much thought about it as on a neutral field today, who wins. And that's why the Cardinals were clearly in this group versus the lower group. And I put them at the top of this 3-team group for me as well, based on that. If they played right now on a neutral field, who do you have the most confidence in coming away from that game with a win? Now, again, it's shades of gray here. It's just a few percentage points, but the Cardinals are playing really solid football right now. And you said nobody's talking about the Cardinals. I did a Cardinals podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I realized nobody ever talks about the Cardinals. You cannot generate volume about the Cardinals. Nobody gets excited about it. There are Cardinals fans and ardent ones. They just don't make a noise in the NFL woods. You know, people kind of forget that they're there. This team is poised to make people remember that they're playing football. They're playing really good football. They might win that division and make noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, every 10 years or so, we get like a Cardinals run. You know, like they don't happen terribly often, but boy, they're fun every single time. Right? There was that 2008 run, which like every millennial ever looks back very fondly on, just because it was so fun with Larry Fitz going off and just having a generational playoffs. You had that couple years of Bruce Arians, you know, with that crazy Packers playoff game. Like again, 7 to 10 years, the Cardinals are going to show up in January and just have an absolute monster playoffs and be super fun and just be great television. I think right now, like we might be getting that cycle returning. So I'm excited for that. The other team I have in this tier, conference championship ceiling, I did not think going into this year after J.J. McCarthy got injured that I would be saying this, but Minnesota Vikings, still conference championship ceiling. Not Super Bowl ceiling, because I'm still not quite at that hump where I'm like, they could beat Detroit, they could beat Philly to get there. But could they play against Detroit or Philly in the conference championship game? I think they could. This defense is still elite, like still one of the top 2 to 3 in basically every single category that matters. You know, if you're looking at Sam Darnold, he's been shakier lately, but not to the point where it's truly cost them. Now, they benefited from playing against Jacksonville. If they played against any other team, it probably would have cost them, but they managed to win. They gutted it out. All right. I'm willing to give them grace. I'm willing to think about the first 8 weeks of the season, not the last 3. But overall, like, they still have skill position talent we love. There's a lot to love about this team. The reason why I don't think they would beat Philly right now, and the reason why I don't think they would beat Detroit right now, is because, boy, that Christian Darrisaw injury is rearing its ugly head, right? They're top 10 in true dropbacks this year. Again, no play action, no screen, no RPO, like true dropback passing. They're top 10 in terms of number of those dropbacks, and they're 7th worst in terms of pressure percentage allowed on those dropbacks. They're like the opposite of the Cardinals. Can't pass protect. Almost a 40% pressure rate. So if you can't really do a true dropback pass game because you can't pass protect, and we know the difference in Sam Darnold's numbers between play action and true dropback passing. We went over that about a month ago. I don't know, man. Like, that's going to be tough to go toe-to-toe against the top 2 teams in this conference. If you can kind of only win one way, play defense, run the ball, throw play action bombs. Like, when it works, it works. Like, they win that way. If they get bogged down and Sam's throwing red zone picks, Jacksonville ain't walking through that door in January. Like, you're going against Dan Campbell and all those boys. Like, you got to play mistake-free football, and you got to be able to pass without the aid of a hard play action fake and throwing it 60 yards down the field to JJ. Like, you got to play more than one way to make it. And I don't think they can. I think they're a good team. I think they're a very good team. Super fun to watch. Great television. Not complete enough. I think Vikings fans are still going to be satisfied with this year because they were staring down the barrel of a very depressing season, when JJ got hurt and they're like, God, what do we do now? Like, this is still a far favorable outcome compared to what it could have been. But I don't think they have it this year. I really don't.
I feel like the Vikings are in the middle of that montage of like one of the land speed record movies when they're like pressing the engine and the needles are starting to shake a little bit. Everybody's hunching over. Are they going to hold together? Like, on any given week, they can. They have a ton of top end talent. The coaching we like a lot on both sides of the ball. So could they surprise? Could they upset somebody? Absolutely. It's only a bomb to JJ away. But in terms of that consistency, in terms of the cohesiveness and how we felt about them being a solid football platform through the first 6 to 7 weeks of the year, the needles are starting to shake a little bit. And when you get to the playoffs, that's when those engines explode. So it's solidly in the middle tier here. Have the talent to beat anybody on any given day. More issues than they did in the first 6 weeks of the season that I think will be exploited as you go deeper into the playoffs, which is what keeps them out of the top tier for me. So with the Vikings out of the way, we got to talk about the Packers. And I know this is going to make a lot of Packers fans mad, but I do have them in the middle tier, not in the top tier. And again, it's more about that on a neutral field. Who do I feel like could win? Everything I said about the Vikings can go for the Packers as well, except I think they're better. Like, there are some things that are shaky. And honestly, it's
Wait, when you say they're better, you mean Green Bay's better or Minnesota's
Green
better?
Bay is better.
Okay.
Green Bay is better
now
than the
everybody in the
Vikings.
comments can fight. I just wanted to specify.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, come on. It's NFC North fans. We're all going to fight in the comments. That's what we do. The Packers, honestly, if they had absolutely destroyed the Bears, and this sounds like the silliest thing in the world, because the Bears came in as complete walkovers. They were speed bumps. Everybody expected them to score sub 10 points and for Green Bay to roll out of Chicago with a win as usual. There you go, Packers fans. There's your supplication for me. I'll just kneel down and say, look, I know what it looks like. Instead, with Thomas Brown and 5 days helming the offense, he came in on Tuesday night. The Bears pushed them within a field goal. Yes, on their home field, but the Bears are not a good football team this year, especially not on offense. And to be able to do that against a team that I think is still very good, let's be honest. The Packers could be in the top tier, but if I go on that sort of neutral field theory that I was using for the rest of these decisions, and we look at the two teams that we'll get to in the top, which most fans can figure out by now, it's not a surprise. If you're going to stack up the Packers versus the Lions or the Eagles on a neutral field right now, could they beat them? They sure could. It's much more high variance, though. We knew about the variance in the offense. We've talked about Jordan Love's interceptions and how Matt LaFleur is very comfortable with them. We saw it again in Chicago. He was more than comfortable to bomb it down the field into double coverage, and it paid off for them. If any of those balls to Christian Watson get deflected, that game's a lot closer, and the Bears probably win it without the last second field goal. But he's going to take that imbalance because that is the explosive element. It's closer to what Pittsburgh's doing than a lot of people want to talk about in terms of not volume. Love is a better quarterback by volume. He hits more of those shots and whatever else, but their reliance on, hey, Jordan's going to chuck it up a couple of times a game into high leverage situations, and we're going to win those. That's more tenuous in the playoffs. And when I'm feeling solid, I want to feel really solid about those top two teams that I put in the Super Bowl tier here. And Green Bay is just shaky enough that they fall into the conference championship game tier, the second game tier for me. Could they be the NFC representative for the Super Bowl? Sure. They're going to have to hit a roll, and they could. We've seen them do it in the past. Do I feel great about that? No, I feel just shaky enough about that they slip down a tier for me. It's probably, quite frankly, at the top of this tier. Like, again, if you put the Packers and the Cardinals on a neutral field, it's a really good game right now.
And we might be destined. I mentioned how the Cardinals every 8 to 10 years, they're going to have like a crazy ass playoff game against the Packers. We might have another one this year. That's just a really, really fun matchup overall.
Yep.
I will say my disagreement on the Packers, I put them in the Super Bowl tier and not the conference championship tier, because I think when it comes down to it, there's a lot of football games in January that get decided by just which quarterback can make the most preposterous throw. And boy, Jordan Love's pretty high on that list, right? Like he can do things that very few other quarterbacks can do. And I don't like the picks. I'm not saying I enjoy the picks, but I still think about that comment from Dan McDermott, who we work with at Underdog. Great guy, Packers fan. And there was a comment he made like a month ago on this channel where he's like, I really like Jordan Love stylistically compared to Rodgers because he doesn't shut it down the moment he throws a pick, right? Like he's willing to keep just punching. Like he will try to punch his way out of the corner. And sometimes it doesn't work, but a lot of the times it does. And it's refreshing to have a quarterback that doesn't back away from an opportunity, right? And Rodgers would do that. Like he was ultra efficient, but there was a lot of throws down the field where it's like, Aaron, I know you can make that. Like I know you can hit it. And he just wouldn't, right? Like he would throw it away. All right, live for 3rd and 10. Whereas Jordan's like, I might throw a pick on this, but there's a 65% chance I don't. And if I hit this throw, we're getting a 40-yard gain. We're set up in the red zone. And we're pretty darn good in the red zone, right? We're going to get points out of this. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to throw picks, but like my defense is pretty good. Jeff Hafley's cooking this year. On balance, I think I'm going to get more 7s out of it than you're going to get 3s if I throw a pick. So if I can just do that multiple times per game, we're going to net out more points. And Dan's comment just really made me think about it differently. Like I don't like that he throws picks, but I like that he's aggressive. And I like that he's really, really good at it. Like he's really, really good at making those crazy throws. Like again, I just can't emphasize how much fun he is to watch. Sometimes you're watching through your fingers where you're like, Jordan, please, God. But like he's just fun, man. He's fun because he takes swings and they work more often than not. And I think when you combine that with a good defense, like the approach is sound. Like they win because of it.
Yeah, we're both walking along a path on the top of the same ridge. And you're tipping a little bit off towards one side, and I'm tipping a little bit off to the other side. And I'll say one thing, because I agree with everything you said about Jordan, and especially about Dan's comment. And, it made us both think differently about that. And as I watch it through that lens since then, I came out and said, LaFleur's comfortable with it because if he wasn't, he would shut it down. He likes what is happening. He likes, on balance, all those explosive plays and what it does for his offense, and he absolutely does. But earlier when we were talking about AFC teams, we talked about who they might come up against. So how good do you feel about that approach against the Lions secondary and the Eagles secondary?
I like it more against the Lions because they play more man coverage, so there's going to be more space theoretically. To less brackets, right? The Eagles, they're going to be in quarters and they're going to be in quarter half. Like there's just nothing over the top against Philly. So it's going to be tough for him to bomb it down there. Like the Eagles are the matchup that the more the season goes on, and especially as Vic's defense has gotten better and they're really playing like a Vic Fangio defense now. They weren't in the first month. They are now. I really don't like the Packers matchup against Philly for that reason, because they're going to put the umbrella over the top and they're not going to give Jordan that. They're going to make him execute a 10, 11, 12 play drive. Detroit is going to be a lot more man coverage heavy. They're going to play a little bit riskier. They're going to say, like, we think we can hit more of them than you, and we'll just concede that it's going to be 36-34, and we think we're going to get to 36. Philly is the one where it's like, no, this is going to be like 17-10, and we think we're going to be the 17. And I think I think they would rather play Detroit, all things being equal.
Yeah. So for you, it tips you off one side. For me, as I look at those matchups and how dependent really the Packers are on them, they have to have those wins. It is difficult for them. And again, even if they didn't have those wins against a team like the Bears, which you thought they were going to roll, The Bears' safeties aren't great. The corners are very good, but the safeties aren't great. They needed those plays against bad safeties to make the rest of their day work, and they would not have won without them. Do I feel that confident with them going against better team defenses, with the Lions and especially the Eagles? I don't. So I tip off one side, you tip off the other. But again, we're talking about, single percentage points here because that's what this is about. We're talking about all the best teams in the NFL.
Well, for the last two teams in the Super Bowl category, which you and I share, Lions and Eagles, if we're looking at percentage points, neutral field, neutral, emphasis on the word neutral field, because where each one of them has to travel to could be a big determining factor. But in our headcanon here, neutral field, Lions, Eagles, which one's the 51% and which one's the 49%? I have my own answer, but I want to hear yours first.
I think it really is. It might even be 50.5 and 49.5. This is the class of the NFC without a question, and two of the best teams in the league, not just in their own conference. And right now, today, again, ask me tomorrow, it might be different. I'm going to go Lions right now. They're on a roll. They understand how to win not only blowouts. We saw that again. What do good teams do to bad teams, right? The answer is not win. The answer is beat the freaking brakes off them, right? And we saw the Lions do that. They were like, look, Jaguars are clearly struggling. That's a Jaguars problem. We don't really care. We happen to have them on the schedule today, and we're going to run it up to the point where we're going to put our backup quarterback in because that's what teams do. When we are expected to win this game, we're going to win it and win it by a lot. There's not any question about this game whatsoever. So I'll lean Lions, but it is by the thinnest of margins because I actually think the Philadelphia roster is equal to, and that's really tough because the Lions roster is really good. Philadelphia, like you said, the Vic Fangio defense is coming around. Didn't look like it in the first month of the season. Their pass rush has also come up. Nolan Smith is making a contribution that he made almost none of last year. Jalen Carter is wrecking shop on a weekly basis. We've talked about how good that secondary is, how high we are on Quinyon, the difference Cooper DeJean has made since he's come into that lineup. So if you're talking about talent on talent, like Philadelphia can stack up talent on talent each side of the ball. So it is the thinnest of margins, but Detroit feels like they're on a roll of knowing they should win games and then going out and winning them, whether it's close or whether it's not. They understand the assignment and they're getting it done every week.
If I had to choose, again, neutral field, Philly versus the Lions, if one of them hosts the other, I'll just go with the home team. Fine, whatever. Sure. Neutral field, I would go Philly. Because the difference these two young DBs have made, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, cannot possibly be understated.
Nope.
Like they have transformed this defense entirely, right?
Yeah, it's worst to first.
Absolutely. And we're talking about like horrifically bad defense, even by Eagles standards. They've had some bad defenses before. Horrifically bad. Now, top 3 in the league. And they're using largely the same concepts and verbiage that they did before. Like they haven't switched a lot schematically because the guys before were running Vic's defense, or at least their versions of Vic's defense. And now you got, the one and only. And what's the phrase? The Chrysler 300 looks like a Rolls Royce till a Rolls Royce pulls up. Vic's
it's
the
Bentley,
Rolls Royce.
But yep.
Bentley, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
It's like he's the real deal. And it's not just because they're great man coverage defenders, which they are. They don't call a lot of man coverage, at least true man coverage, but when they do, they're great at it. It's the fact that this defense structurally relies on communication and discipline more than a lot of other defenses out there. And they have several calls that they rely on to basically identify what the main threat is of an offense and eliminate them completely. So let's just game it out here. Let's say they were playing against Detroit, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown, we're focusing on Amon-Ra. If it's a 3-by-1 look, Amon-Ra's outside, like we're just not going to let him get over the top. He's more of a slot guy, but still he can still win vertically. So we're going to call half quarter to Amon-Ra's side wherever he is if he's outside. If he then motions into the slot, we're going to change the call to quarters so we can get a bracket on him. If he motions again to the other side, okay, now we're going to be in quarter, half. The half field safety is shifting to him. And so you can have one call, and they literally just have one call, and it's based on whatever jersey number they're game planning for. They can play out like 3 different kinds of coverages based on where he's lined up. If we're getting motion or not. Again, I don't know if I did a great job of explaining it. I'm working on a whole video about this whole concept, but what I'm trying to say is, or what I'm trying to put into words here is, a defensive call is not just a defensive call in Philly. A defensive call will change multiple times before the ball is even snapped based on whatever the game plan is that week and whatever threat they're trying to take away. And to do that relies on discipline, it relies on communication, and more importantly, it relies on discipline and communication from a bunch of really young players that have never played a defense like this before, that have never gotten a coverage call, seen how the offense was lined up, changed that coverage that you're running, and then responded to motion in real time at the snap to adjust what coverage you're in. That is really, really hard to do for like a 21-year-old that's never done anything like that before. But they're doing it. So credit to Vic for coaching his ass off. Credit to these young guys for picking it up. It's not just about them being sticky in coverage. It's about them not screwing up in coverage. And that's why I think ultimately they're going to be the team at the end, because not only do they have talent for talent with Detroit, but their coordinators are just damn good. And if there's one DC out there that I think cancels out Ben Johnson, it's Vic. And I just wouldn't want to play Philly right now. They're too talented and they're too well coached. Nick Sirianni's like the only weakness. And if they just lock Nick in his car before the game and say, we'll come out and get you in like 4 hours, they probably win it. I think Nick is probably the only way they would lose is if Dan Campbell just outcoaches him at the head coach level. But coordinator-wise, give me Philly.
It's tough for me to vote against Ben Johnson and all those weapons because you can take away Amon-Ra. We've seen Jamison make plays. We haven't seen a ton of Sam Laporta. I feel like all of a sudden he's going to explode and everybody's going to go, oh, yeah, he didn't get bad at football. Their running back tandem is amazing. And, the offensive line it suffered some injuries, but it's holding up. And this is going to be a great battle. Again, we're not saying that the Eagles are the class of the NFC or the Lions are the class of the NFC. We're saying these are clearly the top 2 teams. One of them is most likely going to end up in the Super Bowl.
All right. So for those of you that have followed along this entire episode, this is a long one. We're back to doing long episodes here on Bootleg. How about that? Again, just to recap. So in the Super Bowl tier for the AFC, I have Chiefs, Bills, and Ravens. EJ, I believe, just had Chiefs and Bills, correct?
Correct.
Okay, for the conference championship ceiling, I just have the Steelers in the AFC. EJ had the Steelers and the Ravens.
And the Broncos.
Oh, and the Broncos. That's right. I forgot you're super high on Denver. And then for the division round ceiling, I have the Texans, Broncos, and Chargers. EJ had the Texans and Chargers. Over in the NFC side, Super Bowl tier, I had the Lions, Eagles, and Packers. EJ just had the Lions and Eagles. In the conference championship, I had the Cardinals and Vikings for their ceiling. EJ had Cardinals, Vikings, and Packers because he's a hater. Division round ceiling. We both had Falcons.
Okay, so Steelers fans can come for you, and the Packers fans will sharpen their knives and come after me.
As is tradition, EJ, as is tradition. All right, fun show today. I would love to hear all of your guys's in the comments, your ceilings for all 14 of these teams. Where you see them stacking up, or rather how far you think they could get between division round, conference championship, and Super Bowl. Feel free to leave those down below because I'm curious if people see it very differently than us, which I imagine they probably do. Also want to thank all of our patrons, of course, Fitzy, Andrew, Connor, Eichen, Liam, and Mike. Once again, appreciate all of you guys do for us. We had a patron-only game preview for the Seahawks and Niners last week. Would love for you guys to let us know what patron-only content you want this week, and we'll make sure to do that for our second episode of the week. I want to thank Homage as well for being our clothing partner. You can find them at the link in the description below or at the QR code on the screen. If you want to get gear for your favorite NFL team, if you want to get bootleg gear, if you want to get college football gear, basically anything, Homage has that for you, either for yourself or for somebody else's holiday season. And EJ, I think I'm out of promos. You got anything?
I have no more promos. We got a lot of cool stuff in the works. Had a couple of fun meetings this morning. We're already looking ahead to draft time, but there's a lot of fun NFL football yet. Feels weird that we're only halfway through. Feels like it's been longer than that, but we are rolling into the holidays, Thanksgiving football, Christmas. There's Black Friday game this year again, and then it's going to be New Year's, playoffs, Super Bowl. We will probably be there as well, so it just feels like it's picking up speed right now.
Yeah, a lot of Delta flights on the calendar at the moment. I forgot we travel more out of the regular season than we do in the regular season, but we're getting to that travel time of year for us. So again, thank you all for watching and listening wherever you happen to be watching and or listening. And with that, we'll see you soon.